Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. My name is Scott Morgan, Roth, the Motor City Madmouth. Glad to have you tonight. Just to give you an idea, this broadcast is simulcast, and you can find it through Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts, as well as subscribing to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com, or actually you can find our YouTube channel on www.southfloridatribune.com. Access the link there. Subscribe. That's all there is to it. So again, you can find it through our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. With that said, have a great broadcast lined up here tonight. And the subject matter is Lou Whitaker, a Hall of Famer. Well, you know what? Let me set the stage here. But before I do that, I want to introduce my panel tonight. Greg Fuchs, welcome back.
Good evening, everybody. Glad to be here.
Rick Curti.
Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
AKA Mr. Opinion. Okay. And we know you'll definitely have them tonight. And last but not least, Eric Katz, our new version of the natural. We're just trying to get him in the rotation so he can become even more natural at what he's doing. So he's come a long way in the short time we've had him. Welcome back, Eric.
Thank you.
All right. Well, as I mentioned to you before, this episode is going to be titled as Lou Whitaker, a Hall of Famer. Before I get my panel involved, I'm going to go over some numbers. I want to make sure everybody can digest those numbers, okay? The Sweet Lou and teammate Alan Trammell comprise the longest winning double play combination in Major League Baseball history at 19. Lou Whitaker is a five-time All-Star, a World Series champ in 1984, an American League Rookie of the Year in 1978, three-time Gold Glover, four-time Silver Slugger Award. His batting average was 276. His home runs were 244. He had 2,369 hits. RBIs, he had 1,084. Now, he hasn't been able to make the cut on the modern era ballot yet. His next chance will be in about 2 to 3 years. I should also point out that one of the reasons why we're doing this show now is that Lou Whitaker is number one, is going to be retired in a ceremony at Comerica Park on August 6th, prior to the 6-10 game versus Tampa Bay Rays. Good PR by the Detroit Tigers in a way to get his number out there retired in advance. And maybe that gives him a push there to get him finally inducted. Now, the number was originally supposed to be retired in 2020, but postponed because of COVID-19. We all know that with no fans there, nobody's going to appreciate it. So why bother? And of course, the only other Detroit Tiger who had his number retired that's not in the Hall of Famer is Willie Horton, who was on the 1968 World Series championship team. And it's only going to be fitting that the numbers of both Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker will be on the wall together. The most potent double play combination. And what's nice about Lou Whitaker, like Alan Trammell, they spent their entire career with one franchise. Now, before I turn it over to you guys, okay, I do want to point out some about Kirby Puckett, the legendary Minnesota Twin. Okay, Kirby Puckett had 10 All-Star game appearances as a center fielder. And when I talk about comparing his All-Star game appearances versus that of Whitaker, you have three outfield positions. So naturally, the All-Star game stat should be working in Puckett's favor, knowing you have one second baseman versus three outfield positions. Now, as I line up Kirby Puckett and Lou Whitaker, I'm going to repeat these numbers and go side by side, and then we're going to go on from there. I mentioned Lou Whitaker's numbers: home runs 244, Kirby Puckett had 207. His hits, Lou's were 2,369, Puckett 2,304. RBI, Lou Whitaker 1,084, 1,085. Now, I don't care about the 318 batting average that Kirby Puckett had. I get it. Okay, but the reality is that there's only a bit of a discrepancy between 276 for Sweet Lou versus 318. And of course, Minnesota has one more world championship over Detroit. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Fuchs. Does Lou Whitaker belong in the Hall of Fame?
Lou Whitaker is a great example of the fine line you trend between, was he a very good player or was he a Hall of Fame talent? And I think he's right on that fine line. I lean both ways. There's certainly players you can compare him to. You already mentioned Kirby Puckett. You already mentioned Alan Trammell. Trammell and Whitaker's statistics are eerily similar. unbelievable how close they are to each other. So you can make the easy thing. Hey, if Trammell's in, Whitaker should be in. And that's the way I'm sort of leaning. The one thing that can sort of get stuck in my craw, if you take his average per game performance and prorated over 162 games, he was a 276 hitter, 17 home runs a year, 66 RBIs. Is that Hall of Fame? Now, that said, I remember when he was playing, he was one of the best second basemen in baseball for 15 plus seasons. But then again, 17 homers, 66 RBIs a year, 276 average. That doesn't make you jump up and down and say Hall of Fame. But if Trammell's in there and another shortstop was in there, Phil Rizzuto, whose statistics pale in comparison to Lou Whitaker. And based on that, I would put Whitaker in.
All right, let me point out another thing too that I noticed. I decided before the show here to let people know and preview this show. And it was interesting. One of my cousins, Ron Kroll, out in Metro Detroit, definitely feels that he belongs in. Of course, is he partial toward him? Yeah, but it doesn't matter. We grew up at a good time at Detroit Tiger baseball as well. You know, they won a World Series in '84, and the Tigers were one of the more dominant teams in the 1980s for a decade, led by Sparky Anderson. And I know the guy that helped me create this show, Louis Adio Weiss, says that Whitaker believes 100% should be in. And you know what? I'm not going against Louis Adio Weiss because him and I created this show. And Louis is one of the more bright young baseball minds out there. But with Louis and his incredible nature of coming up with stats, saying that he belongs in 100%, I'm not going against Louis at all. With that said, a guy that had his fair share of battles with Louis Adio Weiss, Rick Curti. Rick, give me your, well, you know what? Go ahead and mention a little about Louis, but don't beat him up too bad because I know you had some interesting debates.
Louis is a great guy. He's Mr. Analytics. I'm Mr. Opinionated. He's Mr. Analytics. Knew everything about stats. Sometimes we disagreed on some things, but he's a good guy all around. For me, about Lou Whitaker, absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, how in the world can you put Alan Trammell in and not have Lou Whitaker? They're one of the greatest double play combinations in baseball history. Their numbers are similar. And to me, it's like this, you know, if you're going to have a food Hall of Fame and you put peanut butter in the Hall of Fame, you leave out jelly. I mean, and that's how they were. They were peanut butter and jelly together. They were a great combination together. Their numbers are similar. I've seen other people get in the Hall of Fame with way less numbers. You know, you mentioned Phil Rizzuto. Another guy I think of is like Bill Mazeroski. I mean, all people remember Bill Mazeroski is hitting that game-winning home run in the World Series. And that's pretty much it. And that's probably why he's in the Hall of Fame. He's a great player, but Hall of Famer. So I always have believed he should have been in the Hall of Fame. And, you know, I'm glad they're retiring his number. I thought they should have retired his number a long time ago. He was a great player. I remember him playing. Him and Trammell together were just fantastic players. They're fantastic in their positions. And if you're going to put Alan Trammell in, when I heard Alan Trammell go in the Hall of Fame, I said, great. I can't wait to see Lou Whitaker get in right away. And I'm still waiting. So for him not to be in there, and you have Trammell and you have all his statistics and gold gloves and everything, to me, he's no doubt he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, another thing I should point out too is beyond the fact that they both spent their entire careers with the Detroit Tigers, they grew up in the Tiger farm system. Think about it, they were with the Lakeland Tigers. The Tigers had a double-A team out in Montgomery, Alabama, excuse me. And then they ended up making it to Evansville, where they played with the Evansville Triplets. So they grew up in a minor league system and came up at the same time. So, you know, we're talking about not only major leagues, but their history as professional baseball players and their careers running parallel. That to me is phenomenal what those two guys have meant. All right, Eric, I know you've been patiently waiting, so go out there and tell us what you think.
Well, he has more hits. A lot of Hall of Famers who are in and presently have less hits than he do. Take Ron Santo, for example. Ron Santo just got in because he was became so iconic with the Cubs. That's probably the only reason why. And also the pressure from the fan base to get him in. Also, he has more hits than Joe DiMaggio and Harmon Killebrew. I mean, if you're hitting the ball more than Joe DiMaggio, why shouldn't you get in?
Interesting points. Okay. You want to elaborate on that, or because you're making a
I
good
mean,
argument?
Joe DiMaggio, granted, Joe DiMaggio had that 56 game hit streak, which I don't think anybody's going to break. The guy who came closest to it was Pete Rose. But my point being, like, there are guys behind him who hit the ball less, who played like maybe a decade or two before Whitaker did, who are in the Hall of Fame. He also, and then Alan Trammell, who who actually has statistically less hits than Lou Whitaker, is in the Hall of Fame. And I don't think Trammell was more different of a player than Lou Whitaker. Why shouldn't Whitaker get in? He was a key part of that 84 tie during that team, the team that won the World Series back in 84, when they just took baseball by storm and just dominated. I mean, why shouldn't Whitaker be in the Hall of Fame?
So with that said, I want to ask you an interesting question. Okay, Greg, we'll start off with you. Does the 1984 Tiger team or the Tigers get their respect amongst the big baseball people? And I'll tell you why I say that. Okay, it took Jack Morris forever to get in the Hall of Fame. We know Kirk Gibson got a World Series ring with the Dodgers. I don't know whether his numbers were overly great that would be worthy of Hall of Fame numbers. Okay, but and then you got Lance Parrish, who to me one of the best catchers to ever play the game, and yet he hasn't gotten a sniff at all either. And now I know that there were some good players like Chet Lemon, Milt Wilcox, Dan Petrie, just to name a few. But how do you think history has really treated the Tigers in the 80s, let alone, these particular players? Because we know that if Lou Whitaker's not in, and he should be in, and it took Alan Trammell and Jack Morris a while to get in, where do you go? And if I really want to go any further, Willie Hernandez had one of the best seasons ever, albeit it was just a couple of years. So, Greg, how does history treat the Detroit Tigers?
Well, I think if you talk to true baseball fans, they will truly respect and give the Tigers their due. The general public, I mean, it's the Detroit Tigers. The nation does, people outside of Michigan don't care about the Detroit Tigers.
Right.
If the 1984 Tigers all of a sudden put on New York Yankee uniforms or LA Dodger uniforms, it is a totally different story. If Lou Whitaker played for the Yankees, he'd already be in the Hall of Fame.
Well, amazingly enough, I've always advocated for Mickey Lolich getting in the Hall of Fame. And I look at a lot of the different numbers out there. And you know what? When you look at the amount of strikeouts that Lolich amassed, when you look at how many innings he pitched, and let alone winning 3 games in the 1968 World Series, not getting in. And of course, Willie Horton was a heck of a player for the Tigers. And we all know at least Al Kaline got his due. But to me, the Tigers remind me a little bit of Rodney Dangerfield. They just don't get a whole lot of respect. Right, Rick?
Yeah, I agree. And they had one of the greatest starts in all of baseball, finished strong. They won it all. And people don't talk about them. They definitely don't have all the respect. And yeah, if Lou Whitaker was a Yankee or a Dodger, or, played for the Giants with Bobby Bonds and Willie McCovey, he had been in like long time ago. So it's unfortunate that, that people don't get in because they're like underrated, like a Fred McGriff. So it's just unfortunate that he's not in. And like I said, if you're gonna have Alan Trammell in, you got to put Lou Whitaker in. Can't put peanut butter in the Hall of Fame and leave out jelly. The way I look at it, so he should have been in. I'm glad they're finally retiring his number. To me, it should have been retired a long time ago. I remember seeing Lou Whitaker play. He was one of the best second basemen I'd ever seen. He was a great hitter. He won a World Series, and to me, it's like, just because he wasn't a flashy player and he played in Detroit and didn't hit 50 home runs a year doesn't mean he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame.
What's your take, Eric?
I think part of the reason is just precisely that he didn't play in New York. I mean, you got people now who, to me, they got in because they played in like the big market like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco. It's probably part of the reason why it took them so long to get Jack Morris in the Hall of Fame, despite having 250 plus wins and over 2,400 strikeouts. I mean, the problem is the 84 team never get its due. It was the type of year where they just ran away with baseball, and they should be more iconic than they actually were. 68 just gets more love from the general public was because what they did for the city of Detroit, which at the time which at the time the world was in shambles. But I just think that because the team isn't iconic enough, and I think also part of the reason why Lolich doesn't get the love was because Denny McClain won over 30 games that year. So Lolich had a solid season, no doubt, and he was a solid pitcher and probably should be in the Hall of Fame. Problem was he came in before his time because Denny McClain won 30 games that year. I mean, he's the last guy to do it. I mean, say what you want about Denny McClain, but he's the last guy to win 30 games.
Well, so that's an interesting point, Eric. I'm glad you brought a few things up, but we'll break them down. Market size, you're saying all you guys seem to think that market size is hindered the case of Lou Whitaker, let alone the 84 Tigers. I think what makes the Tigers 68 World Series more impressive is the fact that they beat the St. Louis Cardinals, who are looking to repeat, because I know they had beaten the Boston Red Sox, and you talk about the players on that 68 Cardinals team. Lou Brock was on that team, Tim McCarver, Bob Lowell.
Kurt Flood.
Bob Gibson, you name it. I mean, that was a loaded group there. And the fact that the Tigers came from behind from 3 games to 1 to go ahead and beat the Cardinals alone says itself. But you're right. I think market size definitely is something you have to take into consideration for sure. And let's face the reality, Denny McClain does have a record that will never be broken. The man won 33. He won 31 games. I mean, that's a lot. I don't think anybody's going to touch a lot of those records anyhow with what Denny McClain did. And yeah, I know the Tigers got off that incredible torrid start and they never looked back. I'm just a little amazed though that some of these other guys haven't gotten. And I understand that Kirk Gibson's numbers probably don't warrant. Kirk Gibson's mainly known for his big moments with the Dodgers, as well as his iconic home run with helping the Tigers in '84. But staying on point with Lou Whitaker, I mean, let's face it. Okay, maybe for all we know, he wasn't as outgoing, and I don't know for sure. So you can only speculate that sometimes Hall of Famers, if they get along well with the media, they're not as reserved. You wonder if that's taken into consideration. 100%. I don't know. I haven't gone that deep into it, but his numbers, going back to what I mentioned before about Kirby Puckett, outside of the batting average of 318, and again, I don't even take into consideration the fact that the All-Star games that Kirby had 5 more. The other numbers are very, very comparable to Kirby Puckett, which warrants another reason why I strongly believe that Lou Whitaker should be in there. And again, how do you discount the fact that a double play tandem went 19 years together? I mean, geez.
Well, I think it kind of also works. I think, the double play combination kind of works against him because Trammell was on that team and Trammell was the quote unquote star of that team because, and he was obviously the favorite. That kind of works against Whitaker because Trammell is so known for his time with the Detroit Tigers. Granted, including to the point where they brought him back as a manager for a season. But problem is though, that works against him because Trammell is just so iconic. I mean, it's like with Lolich, who I believe is a Hall of Famer, he unfortunately was pitching at a time where Denny McClain was on the team and he happened to be pitching the same year. Denny McClain was going to win over 30 plus games, which probably won't be broken now because pitchers don't throw enough now. Like their innings are becoming shorter and shorter as we speak.
Right. Well, yeah, the game has become more specialized. A guy that gets a quality start, Rick, nobody knows it better than you, right? You go 6-7 innings, you're considered considered a good start by today's standards.
Back in the day, you threw the ball and you completed the game, and if someone was brought in for you, regardless of it being like 8, regardless if you went 7 or 8 innings, that was bad.
Well, yeah, you're angry, right, Rick?
Yeah,
Opinion?
I mean, you're never going to see anyone win 30 games anymore. They got the middle relievers now. There's no way a manager is going to get his star and make him throw 150, 160 pitches because, the wear and tear of your arm and Tommy John surgery and rehab, and they want to keep their players fresh. I mean, you see pitchers getting taken out of games during a no-hitter now. So there is no way you're going to see anybody have a 30-win season. It's just not going to happen. They're just not going to risk the wear and tear of their star. And when I've seen pitchers just get pulled out, after 8 innings and they're in the middle of a no-hitter and they're like, okay, you throw like 120, that's way too much. We're gonna arrest you. That just shows you how much the game has changed in the last 30 years.
Also, it used to be the starters were the ones throwing the gasoline. The idea was to get to the bullpen. Well, now the bullpen throws gasoline too. And so, they're trying to get those guys in, especially with especially, I mean, you can probably blame Sparky Lyle and the Yankees for this, but the idea of a setup man to a closer, where, obviously Sparky Lyle won the Cy Young in 77. And then 78, despite having a Cy Young pitcher, they go out and get Goose Gossage. I think you can kind of blame the Yankees for that tandem and people valuing their bullpens more.
All right, Greg, chime in.
I say one of my favorite stories about starting pitchers not throwing as many innings as they used to is that Mike Flanagan, the ex-Oriole starter, one year he threw 3 complete games in spring training. Man, how crazy is that? You're lucky if those guys go 4 or 5 innings in spring training these days.
Right.
One thing I read about Whitaker today, which I plays well to him making into the Hall of Fame, is his WAR, wins against replacement, which I got to admit, I'm not 100% sure how they calculate that, but he's got the 7th highest WAR for second baseman of all time. The other 6 guys are all in the Hall of Fame.
That's interesting.
I don't believe in WAR. I really don't. It should be about, no one's thinking about that when they get to the plate. It's all about hitting. It's all about hitting, which more or less the home run these days. And it's all about pitching. Like nobody thinks about WAR when you step up to the plate. Either you're going to hit the ball or you're not.
Yeah, I don't either, and I don't understand it, but you hear a lot of people use it these days. So
I know.
That's a millennial thing, is that WAR.
Yeah, there you go. I was waiting for that.
I'm sorry. That's a millennial thing. And
I
never heard of WAR. I've never heard of WAR before. My thing is, it's all about the eyeball test for me. If you have a long career and you're consistent and you're playing great and you're going to all-star games and all, and you just have a nice, great, solid career and your numbers are there, you should be worthy of the Hall of Fame. And that's just the way I look at it.
And I'll go to one guy who, which there's often a very big Hall of Fame debate every year, but I don't think he'll get in, is Roger Maris, which Roger Maris had that problem with Roger Maris, though, is he had 3 great years, which obviously he won the MVP in 60, and obviously everybody knows about 61 and had a great year in 62. Problem is, though, he had a bunch of mediocre years sandwiching those great years. That's why he'll never get in the Hall of Fame.
Well, what you got to remember is with baseball, you need 75% to get in, and our David Ortiz got 77.8% being the lone guy in. So as we discussed on this show a few weeks ago, so getting into this hall is probably the most difficult hall that there is to get in. Now, let me give you my version of WAR, okay? And that's this. To me, WAR reminds me of math, okay? Wasn't good at algebra, wasn't good at geometry, okay? If you think I'm going to try to figure it out at this age, forget it, okay? And I'll even take it a step further about WAR and some of these other analytic stuff, which I have to use for these shows to make sure that they are what they are. I don't go deep into analytics, but my version of baseball is put bat on ball and get outs on defense. And if you can do that, you have a good chance of, as Herman Edwards would say, we play to win the game. Oh, I had to get that one in, guys. So that's, but that's what we do. So I don't know. To me, yeah, I'm not going to get too heavy involved with analytics. Sometimes I think they take analytics to too large of an extreme. But the whole idea is put bat on ball, get the other team out, and allow as few as runs possible. And if you guys can go out there and figure that out, and everybody out there that's listening and watching this broadcast, go ahead and do that. Let me point out to you that this broadcast is once again can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, and you can see it on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also find it at www.southfloridatribune.com. Please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. We have a lot of great videos and shows lined up. I have a lot of excellent shows. Just to promote a few of our own here. We have No Limits, which talks about non-sports related subjects. The South Florida Tribune podcast, which is a local broadcast for area. 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, which is what we're doing at the moment. And Inside the Pigskin, is our football show in the Sports Exchange. So we encourage you to go out there and watch and listen to each and every broadcast, and we'll give you more updates as well. So as we put a button on this show, guys, okay, Greg Fuchs, we're going to start off with you. Okay, give us your overall summary of what you think about Lou Whitaker, and the floor is yours. And then we're going to go around, and then we're going to wrap it up.
If you're looking for a definite yes, no, based on who else is in the Hall of Fame, I would put Whitaker in. One thing that I haven't wrapped my head around is a lot of the guys we've talked about that we thought might be iffy Hall of Fame guys, Mazeroski, Santo, Trammell, Rizzuto, all voted in by the Veterans Committee or whatever it's called these days. So you don't have that. Well, there is a 75% criteria, I think, for the Veterans Committee, but it's only like, I think, 16 guys voting.
Right.
So I
Good
think they
point.
sit around the table, they pretty much know who they're going to vote for, as opposed to just the random hundreds of baseball writers and getting to 75%. So Veterans Committee seems to have lower standards, and maybe it's diluted the Hall of Fame pool a little bit.
Or maybe the Veterans Committee had just, instead of not taking anything from the BBWA, the Baseball Writers Association of America, but the Veterans Committee, or you call it the modern era ballot, depending on what it is, which once again, as I mentioned, Whitaker's eligible for in about 2 years. You're looking at a different set of minds making this decision. So, all right, Rick, go ahead. Some closing thoughts about Lou Whitaker?
Well, he should be in the Hall of Fame. You got Trammell in the Hall of Fame, one of the greatest double play combinations in history. You have other people in. I mean, another guy that took forever to get in was Burt Blyleven. I know he was a guy that a lot of people are like, iffy about, and then he got in, or Jack Morris. So I think Lou Whitaker will eventually get in by the Veterans Committee, just like I believe Fred McGriff will get in by the Veterans Committee. We'll just see. And when it happens, I'll be happy for him. And I'm glad that the Tigers are retiring them. It should have been retired a long time ago, in my opinion, but I'm glad they're doing it now. And I just think he's just one of the best defensive second basemen in baseball history.
Yeah, better late than never on the Detroit Tigers getting it done. And again, I commend him for doing it now. Maybe that'll give his Hall of Fame situation a little bit of a push. Another guy that took a while to get in there was Andre Dawson as well. All right. With that said, okay, Eric, give me some closing thoughts on Lou Whitaker. And then once you guys are doing that, everybody can let everybody know how they can get a hold of
People forget, though, that Lou Whitaker was not going to be your guy that just mashes the ball right out of Tiger Stadium. He just was not that guy. He was more or less your guy who's gonna get on base. And then, guys like Kirk Gibson and Alan Trammell and other parts of that Detroit Tigers lineup would drive him in. He played a big role in that 84 World Series where they absolutely just dominated the Padres and eventually and also dominated baseball. The guy was an all-star. The idea of this game, in order to be the best, is to be an all-star. He even got Silver Slugger awards. The simple part of the game. And I will knock the baseball writers committee, because I've been saying for years that there are a lot of guys that they leave out on the ballots. I think granted they've taken a very harsh stance against steroids. I mean, steroids are a very polarizing topic around the game. But Lou Whitaker was one of the best guys at the top of that lineup. That guy hit the ball. He was a 270-ish hitter, which is pretty good nowadays. Even back then, some of the power guys weren't hitting for average. They were just trying to hit the ball, and pitchers would let the pitch go and pray it doesn't get walloped to the third deck at Tiger Stadium back when that was a thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't be disappointed with a 276 average for a guy which is really, as you mentioned, Eric, is regarded as a punch and Judy type of player when they had a lot of power in that lineup, without a doubt. So you guys make some unbelievable points. I'm glad that you did. And I'm with you. I'm wearing the old English team hat. I saw the guy play in his prime. I know what type of player he was. And there are a lot of players that certainly deserve to be in there that aren't. We're not going to get into steroid guys. I mean, remember how difficult the Baseball Hall of Fame really is. The all-time hits leader is not in there. Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds aren't in there for obvious reasons. I'm not going to get into that now. But it is a tough club to join, as we mentioned on the show a couple of weeks ago. And now we can only hope that at some point or another, Lou Whitaker does get in there. But once again, I'm glad the Detroit Tigers are taking it upon themselves to get him his number retired. As I said, better late than never. His number will be next to Alan Trammell. It should be. So with that said, great show tonight here. Okay, Greg Fuchs, let everybody know that how they can get a hold of you.
Well, I write on southfloridatribune.com, so you can check me out there. And just today I wrote an article about Lou Whitaker, so you can check that out. And on Twitter, I'm at gfuchs at Gregory Fuchs.
Rick?
You can contact me on my website at www.charlottebats.com. My email address is cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook at Charlotte MLB and Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm also on Instagram at Charlotte Bats. I'm on Twitter at Charlotte Bats Baseball, and I'm also on LinkedIn under Rick Curti.
And Rick Curti is my co-host on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. Regular co-host does a phenomenal job with our social media as well, our division there. Eric.
Yes, you can reach me at Sports Team. You can reach me on Twitter at Sports Team News. I also write for BellyUpSports.com, covering everything Wisconsin Badgers and Major League Baseball.
Very good. And I'll reiterate our contact information one more time. And that's it. You can listen, this broadcast is simulcast. You can find it on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel through www.southfloridatribune.com. You can find us on Twitter at Tribune South. You can email us as well at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And you can locate me, Scott Morganroth, on LinkedIn as well. Be more than happy to talk to you as well. So, and I do want to give a shout out to Candy Morganroth Ebling. This woman does one of the most unbelievable jobs keeping it all together, both not only the website, but the broadcast as well. Without Candy, we couldn't do a lot of what we're doing. If you're looking to find our broadcasts on the website, look for WSFT next to the broadcast, and that's what differentiates the broadcast from the regular content. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for joining us on this edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. Once again, the episode is titled, Is Lou Whitaker a Hall of Famer? And it's safe to say it's unanimous here that all four of us on this panel agree that's the case. So we look forward to the next episode. Meanwhile, take care of everybody. And once again, thank you for joining us, and please share it with all your friends, family, because without you guys, we wouldn't have a very good platform that we're only continuing to grow. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.